Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Talos of Tech. Live on Twitch, we're back. I missed you guys so much. It's been way too long, and I'm excited to come back and find out about all the news I missed. And I checked it this morning. Yeah, I didn't miss anything. Literally nothing happened while I was away. But that was kind of the goal, you know. On one hand, it's kind of sad that when we're in this kind of slow season, you know, we're coming off of a big Tesla event, a big Apple event, a bunch of Apple announcements, a lot of disappointment, a lot of excitement, kind of a big mix of everything. And then you take it, you're now waiting for the next big event, which is not going to happen a month later. It's not going to happen a couple weeks later. So now it's just the slow uphill battle going up to iPhone season in September. Yeah, this is the slow part of the year. This is where people get desperate. This is where people start clickbaiting a lot more than usual. This is where people start making up their own news stories because they need some kind of news to talk about. So, that's why I figured it'd be a good time to take some time away. And my theory was correct, which is that I wasn't going to miss anything huge. But it would probably have been worse if there was something huge that dropped while I was away and I wasn't able to talk about it or cover it. So I'm actually somewhat sad that there wasn't, I was gone for probably 10, 11, 12 days, and I still basically didn't miss anything major. And now that I'm back and we can just go back to desperation and speculation, which is the rhyme to my reason, I don't care. As long as I get to interact with you guys, and I've missed hanging out in the Discord a lot more. It's good to be back in there. And I've missed being on Twitch. I've missed live streaming and being able to chat with you guys and also try out Starlink again. Starlink was doing so dang great on my last live stream. It's probably going to suck today, just knowing my luck. But on my last YouTube stream before I headed out for break, it only dropped 0.2% of frames, which was like really, really good. It's gotten a lot more stable now. And I honestly, like, I also was live streaming when it was like 110 degrees outside. Of course, now it lags. I feel like every time I talk about it, that's when it breaks. Let's see. DJ, thank you for the tier 2 subscription on a 30-month string, getting closer and closer to 2 years. Oh, wow. He's 36 months. I don't know. DJ, I'm worried because I'm still debating whether or not I want to if I want to switch away from Twitch and go to YouTube. And one of the biggest reasons I'm hesitant to switch to live streaming exclusively on YouTube is simply because I know there's a lot of people like you that have been subscribing on Twitch for a really, really, really long time. And if I stop streaming on Twitch, that would probably upset you guys a lot. So I'm hoping to weigh that into my consideration or try to come up with some kind of compromise. But yeah, I know that resetting everybody's like year-long commitments to Twitch Prime and everything. Speaking of Cosminator, thank you for 30 months. Welcome back to Cali. Thank you very much. It's good to be back. I missed you all, and it was kind of a hectic vacation. There was a lot going on. I mean, I had fun, a lot of good experiences, and a lot of sad times because, you know, I've always been pretty close to my parents, so saying goodbye to them was sad and all that. But there was a lot of hustling. There was a lot of moving, and there was a lot of, okay, we got to get here. And I took my first flight since the pandemic, and I had AirPods Pro the whole time, and they were amazing, so I was glad to have my headphones along. I've ditched the Magic Keyboard case. Now I'm just with the folio cover on my iPad Pro, and I'm going back to the virtual keyboard, and I'm actually getting used to it pretty quickly, and I'm realizing more and more that I want to be separate from the Magic Keyboard case because that was prohibiting me from thinking I could try different iPad sizes in the future. I realized that because the Magic Keyboard case was so expensive and it's only in the 12.9-inch size, I was thinking future terms that for my next iPad purchase or future iPad Pros, I would pretty much only be able to get that one size because I'm fully committed to this expensive keyboard case. And I'm realizing now that if I can live without it, then maybe I would be fine switching to the 11-inch or 16-inch if that ever ends up happening, but I probably wouldn't. Anyway, what would you think of an iPad Pro Studio, Surface Studio, but iPad? Yeah, I would be totally fine with that as long as it ran macOS. If it was just a giant iPad the size of a Surface Studio, you know, like a 30-inch display, and it only ran iPadOS, yeah, that would be kind of dumb. There would probably be someone who buys it. You know, some YouTubers would probably be like, iPadOS is good enough for the basics, and, you know, that's kind of true, I guess. You know, someone who bought a 24-inch iMac and they didn't care about. If someone bought a 24-inch iMac and they didn't care about pro applications, like they weren't buying it for the intense GPU or processing power, and they were just buying it for like browsing Safari or watching YouTube videos, but they also like drawing and stuff, I guess a giant iPadOS desktop looking thing that can fold down into a touch interface, there might be a tiny niche for it. I do think, again, it would be very small. It would ultimately just be really nice to have a desktop with Face ID, though, because we still don't have that. But not a huge deal for me because Apple Watch unlocks my Mac anyway. So even if we did have Face ID on the Mac, which I'm still in favor of, I still want that to happen. It wouldn't be a huge reason to upgrade. Like, for instance, if they end up making my dream iMac later this year with the great Apple Silicon and black bezels, no chin, thin bezel all the way around, if that comes out and I buy it and I use it and I love it, and then the following year there's the same thing with Face ID and just a slightly faster chip, I don't think that would be a good enough reason for me to upgrade my iMac a year later. Maybe like 5 or 4 years down the road when I'm ready for another upgrade. But my goal for my next Big Mac purchase is to go to McDonald's. But my next Big Mac purchase, I want to be very, very future-proof. I want it to last me a long, long time. My iMac Pro is approaching the 4-year mark, and I think that's a pretty good lifespan for a device I spent a bit over $5,000 on, and I know it could definitely go longer. It's not that I need to replace it because the iMac Pro has become unusable. Quite the opposite. It's still great. It still works fine. There's very little problems with it, and I can still edit my videos on it in a pretty time-effective manner. It's just, if I could get a newer machine that could edit my videos faster, I'm okay spending a lot of money on something that I use regularly. That's for to clear up some of the confusion as to why I don't have a Tesla. It's because I spend almost no time driving. Other than this last trip, there was a lot of driving that went on, but it was not in my car. It was mostly in other people's cars because I had to bring vehicles to my parents' new place. But so even if I had a Tesla, I wouldn't have been able to take it on that road trip. But basically, I don't spend a bunch of money on something I don't use, but an iMac is something I would use all the time, like every day. So I'm okay dropping big money on it if it allows me to get content up faster, because that's a big part of my job. So if I'm able to upgrade my Mac and export videos in half the time, that means I could be more efficient, more effective, and get my content out there faster, which could in return be good for the channel, be good for the audience, and help everything around. But I don't need to buy like a brand new $5,000 Mac every year. That's, in my opinion, a little overkill and probably a little bit wasteful. So making sure you get adequate use out of the products you buy, I think, is a good win for the environment and good for your finance as well. So overall, I'm okay with holding on to the next Mac for at least 4 years, maybe 5, depending on how it ages. Or I can't, the main reason I bought the iMac Pro was because I was making this switch to Blackmagic cameras, which were using this higher bitrate, higher bandwidth files, and I was making the switch to 4K at 60, which I was not before. I was just doing 1080 at 60 videos on basic Lumix DSLR cameras, which had pretty low bitrate, and my 15-inch MacBook Pro was handling them just fine. But once I bought the Blackmagic camera with the 4K at 60 and the higher bit rate for the video files, I was very quickly... And also that old MacBook Pro had like 256 gigs, which I regretted almost instantly after I bought it. I was like, oh man, I should have got more. So I was kind of ready to up my processing power on my editing side so that it could match my camera side. But for the foreseeable future, I don't see a ton of new cameras coming into my life that I need a more advanced computer for. I mean, I'm messing around a bit more with the Red Komodo, but I can edit with that on the iMac Pro, and it did okay. I did the entire iPad Pro review I did a couple weeks back was shot on the Red Komodo and edited on the iMac Pro, and it was fine. Obviously, it could be better, but that's what, I'm in the market for an Apple Silicon Mac whenever that gets refreshed. But let's see. Andrew Sibel, thank you for the Twitch Prime for 16 months. I just finished up a year-long internship that required me to defer college for a year. I'm way behind on Apple News and now a freshman this year. My questions is if there's any hope the new MacBook Pro would be out before I leave mid-August. As of right now, it's not looking likely. Anything is possible, of course. Apple's being weird, so I'm not saying 100% confirmed it will come out. I'm just saying, or 100% confirmed it won't come out. Apple's done some weird things this year. They had an April event, and last year they had 3 events in a row, in 3 separate months, really close together. They released iPhones in October, which is very rare. So Apple's doing some weird stuff, but most likely I would anticipate MacBook Pros to come out around October. I think that's when you should expect them. So if you need a new MacBook before then, I could recommend a good stopgap would be a Mac Mini if you can live with a desktop, or find a Mac. If you're doing school, you'll be able to get a MacBook Air on discount for like $900, and then maybe you could. I've heard that the M1 Macs are holding their resale value pretty well, so you could probably get a lot of that value back and use that money towards a MacBook Pro later in the year if that's what you really, really want, because you're worried that the M1 MacBook Air isn't enough. But don't underestimate the power of the M1. It's very capable and very powerful. But yeah, simultaneously, I totally get it. I'm in the same boat of like, M1 performance is great, but I would like a device with more than 2 Thunderbolt ports, and I obviously would love to see something more powerful than the M1 if possible, especially if that's just a few months away. So I would essentially say right now there's little to no hope of a MacBook Pro coming out before mid-August. I would love to be proven wrong. That would be amazing if it did come out before then, but I'm just saying, I'm looking at the rumors and looking at the analysts right now. It doesn't sound likely. Again, not impossible, just highly unlikely. If Apple made your dream iMac but still with a chin, would you tolerate the chin? That's not my dream iMac. RM2646. You don't get what the term dream iMac means. There's no dream iMac but with a chin. Dream iMac means no chin, black bezels, fast Apple Silicon at a decent value. If they did all those things, but it's $10,000, that's not exactly dream iMac. Dream iMac means it does what my iMac wish list did. It doesn't have to have 8 Thunderbolt ports though. I'm willing to compromise on that. But or Face ID, I could live without Face ID because for the webcams I use with my computer, I usually plug in my Blackmagic. This isn't my iMac Pro webcam. This is, and now everyone's gonna be like, "Wow, that looks so much better." But I'm comfortable using this anyway. So. Oh, I'm sorry, Glassfire. Did I miss your sub? Thank you for the tier 1 sub for 20 months. That's a long time. Appreciate it. How have I been? I've been good. I've been busy. The vacation kind of didn't stop. There was definitely nonstop stuff going on, packing and unpacking and moving things and driving and meeting new people and getting settled and everything. It was good, but I appreciate the tier 1. Sorry I missed it. Let's see. Yes, but with all your other hopes? No, the chin is a big one to me because I've had an iMac with a chin for a long time, and if I have to put up with another chin for another 5 years, then I would rather just buy a Mac Mini or a Mac Pro and provide my own display that's going to look way nicer. Because there are tons of fairly affordable third-party displays that look great and have great colors and have great refresh rate and pixel density out there. The primary reason I'm interested in an iMac is because I do like all-in-ones, because I like the idea of having one display, one computer all put together. But if Apple doesn't want to make the dream iMac I was hoping for, it's not a dream iMac anymore. Let's see. Drew Deary, just so you don't think the Cosmonator disappeared off the face of the earth, I will be changing my display name. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for the disclosure. Let's see. Looks so much better. Yeah, of course. McJuggy Nuggets, you would say that. What about the storage and RAM regarding your dream? RAM is very not important to me. I edited and live streamed off the M1 MacBook Air, and I never ran into RAM issues, and that one had 8 gigs of RAM. So I don't really care much about the RAM just because I haven't run into a bunch of use cases where that makes a big difference. No, I definitely want more than 256 gigs. Ideally, on this next Mac, I would like to go bigger because I'm going to hold on to it for a long time, and I probably am going to edit more Red Komodo footage on this next Mac than my current iMac Pro. So 2 terabytes minimum. I probably won't compromise there. I don't think I'd go less than that. Ideally more, if I go with Plan D and end up getting a 16-inch MacBook Pro. In that case, I would probably max it out and get like 8 terabytes just because I know I'm going to eventually use it. But yeah, I would have to get more than 2 because that's what I'm using with the iMac Pro. Do you think you would keep a new MacBook Pro? Possibly. It's not super likely because I find myself more of a desktop user anyway. I just haven't run into a lot of circumstances where I've been... The thing is, when I'm on a trip or I'm far away from home, I'm typically not going to be covering news or filming anyway, because then I would also have to pack cameras with me, which is just a whole nother headache and nightmare. Eventually, maybe someday, I could imagine, like, if I'm just vlogging all the time and I just want to document my vacations and edit them with something a bit more advanced than an iPad, then I could see myself getting a MacBook, but I don't think I'm close to that. I think at this stage in my life, I'm going to be taking 2 or 3 weeks worth of vacation every year, and then the rest of the year I'm just going to be at home working. So for the meantime, I think a desktop is going to be good enough for me. Prioritizing performance, not having to worry about battery health, and after I reviewed the M1 MacBook Air, it became very clear to me I don't need another laptop, especially when I have my iPad Pro, which covers the, if you want a bigger display as you're in the bedroom or on the couch or just on a trip or something and you want a large display to interact with, the iPad works fine. For basic laptops tasks, the iPad replaces all that for me. So it's not likely that any of the MacBook Pros that come out this year I'll end up keeping unless we go with Plan D. For those who are unaware, Plan A is Dream iMac. They make the best iMac ever, and it looks great. There's no chin, black bezels, and everything. That's still what I want, and it's not likely. I'm not saying Plan A will probably happen. It probably won't. That's why there's multiple other plans, is because I don't think Plan A will happen. Plan B is M1X Mac Mini, which means, 8 high-performance cores, way faster than the M1, but also very good value. It starts around $1,100. I spec that thing out to get the most storage possible, and it's way faster than my iMac Pro, and I just supplied my own monitor. I have external monitors here I can use. So I'm totally fine with that if Plan A doesn't work. Plan C, which is pretty tied with Plan B, it's not like in order of if Plan B doesn't happen, I go Plan C, because honestly, I could still see an M1X Mac Mini coming out this year, and I still wait for the new Mac Pro, because I'm very curious to how affordable an Apple Silicon Mac Pro would be. And because my iMac Pro is aging so well, I'm not in a huge rush to replace it. I'd be totally fine waiting on upgrading another year, because I do plan on this next Mac being a long-term Mac. So if they make a super high-performance, 32 high-performance cores, keep in mind M1 has 4, Mac Pro would have 32. Extreme high performance with decent storage configurations, and I can get it around $5,000 or $6,000, and I just have an insanely fast computer. That would be very tempting, and I would likely buy that and keep it for a very, very long time, because it would take forever before I would find a need to replace it. So I'm very curious about that Apple Silicon Mac Pro, but the reason I'm not super sold on it is because there's a decent chance that Apple will still charge through the roof for it. If it's 256 gigs of storage and 8 gigs of RAM for the $6,000 model, and you have to spend another $4,000 to get it up to 2 terabytes or 4 terabytes, then I'm not interested, because that's kind of my limit. Somewhere between $5,000 or $6,000 is kind of the max budget I'm comfortable spending, because I spent almost $6,000 on my last Mac, and my main ideology with future computers is that it should be faster and cheaper than my last one. I don't want to upgrade if it's going to cost more than my last one, because that's just a dangerous precedent to set for yourself, because it means that over time you're just like, okay, I'll spend more. So to keep an Apple sheep in check, to prevent me from going out of control and dropping $10,000, $20,000 on computers, my goal is to make my next Mac around the same price or slightly cheaper than my last Mac. So if the new Apple Silicon Mac Pro ends up being priced really fair, I'd be super tempted, but if not, then I'd probably go with M1X Mac Mini. If M1X Mac Mini doesn't happen, or is not priced well, or doesn't have the ports or storage configurations I want or something, Then plan D would, I think, be just to get a heavily spec'd out 16-inch MacBook Pro, and I would just treat it like a tower. It would basically stay on my desk all the time, plugged in, outputting to an external monitor. I would rarely open it up, but at least I would get really good performance out of M1X or something. Let's see. Simon Wortho, thank you for the Twitch Prime for 31 months. That's a long time. Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to start using Final Cut Pro to edit by purchasing the bundle like you recommended. I heard Final Cut has a problem having videos taking up too much storage for some reason. Is that true? How to fix it? So yeah, by default, here's some little Final Cut Pro tips for everyone. I was actually helping my buddy Mike with Final Cut this weekend. When you first get Final Cut, it by default wants to re-render and recreate all of the files in your project so that you can have better playback. However, that does take up a ton more storage. So what you do is when you're in Final Cut Pro, you go to the top left corner and click Final Cut Pro, go to Preferences, and you go to the Import section. And the first thing under the Import section says Copy. There's a Files tab, just 2 buttons in the Files option. And one of the options says Copy to Library Storage Location, which means that if you recorded a 40 gigabyte file, you drag that file into Final Cut, it now is going to recreate that 40 gigabyte file, which obviously is going to fill up your SSD very, very quickly. Some people like to have that on, but I personally like the other option, which I have selected right now, which is just called Leave Files in Place, which means that instead of recreating the files within Final Cut, it just leaves those files in Finder, and now Final Cut is just accessing those files. So there's only one copy. And I've been doing that for years, and it hasn't really caused any issues. It definitely takes up a lot less storage space. It won't fill up your SSD as much because you don't have to have 2 versions of every file. But I believe it might hurt your playback if your computer's a bit older. I've never had many playback issues with Final Cut on iMac Pro. It might be slightly better if I copied the files in the project, but that's basically the main way to prevent Final Cut from taking up a ton more space. Let's see. What devices does Louise have? Oh, that's an interesting question. Okay, she's got a stainless steel Series 3, which was, I think, a gift from a friend. Oh yeah, he had a new Apple Watch and he didn't need his old one, so he just said I could have it, and then I gave it to Louise because I got a new watch at that point. So basically, hand-me-down Apple Watch down to Louise, and she still uses that, and she's still not really in love with it, but she still wears it. Like some friends of ours were asking me for Apple Watch advice. They were like, which one should I get? And I was saying, you get an SE or, get a refurbished Series 5. And Louise just told him, don't get an Apple Watch. It's not worth it. She's not super sold by it, but she'll still wear it. But she still is just not really in love with it. And she doesn't like the passcode. And, when she removes it, then it doesn't have Apple Pay, and that annoys her. So she does not want a new Apple Watch. If anything, she would want to sell the watch she currently has and just not have a watch. That's just the type of person she is. She doesn't care if she's seen this watch. She doesn't care about bigger display or always on display or health monitoring. She doesn't care about any of that stuff. She's just like, I don't need this. I know. I told her, like, you can just unlock the watch with the Touch ID. And she's like, yeah, but I don't do it. I just put my watch on, like, at the beginning of every day. Anyway, she has a Series 3 and she doesn't like it, but she wears it. And then she has an iPhone SE 2nd gen, which she fast charges every night. So the battery health is not amazing, but she's fine with it. She doesn't have any need or want for a better one or a newer one. She's probably going to hold on to that SE for a long, long time. And she's also using my old 10.5-inch iPad Pro from 2017. We were just using that this morning. So yeah, that's the same one I bought for the tech channel way back when I was still in the attic. So we still have that iPad and it still gets use, but very light use. It's mostly, most people say Netflix machine, but we don't have Netflix. So I was going to say Peacock machine, but that just sounds wrong. It's a Peacock machine. Basically, she watches YouTube on it, and that's about it. Also, I guess we manage our budget on that, so she uses Google Sheets on the iPad Pro on occasion. Do you guys compete to close the activity rings? Not at all. She doesn't pay attention to that at all. She basically uses the Series 3 for the time. And there's still this bug. I don't know what it is, but whenever she goes on her breaks, she has this timer on the Series 3, and her breaks are usually 10 to 30 minutes. So she'll set a timer for 10 minutes, and then she'll lay down in bed or she'll sit on the couch and relax for a little bit. And at some point, the timer app will just close. It's been doing this for like a year. And she'll just she'll just check her watch and the timer's gone. And she'll go to the timer application and it's not counting down or anything. So that really frustrates her. And I've told her like multiple times, I don't know what the problem is with the Series 3. Maybe something's up with the software. Maybe it's crashing for no reason. But I just told her, don't use that. Use the timer on your phone or set a timer with a Google speaker, something that will work reliably. But she doesn't want to change it. She keeps using the Apple Watch, hoping it'll fix itself. But yeah, she's really not in love with it. And she only has it because it was a gift. I don't think she would have ever bought a new one. I think she bought my old Apple Watch way back in 2017, like my Series 0, and at some point it broke or something, and it dropped and the glass shattered, and then water got in it. It's gone. It doesn't work anymore. I don't know where it is, but does she have / use a MacBook? She does own a 2009 MacBook Pro, but she does not use it much. We basically only use it for DVDs. And last year we were going through, someone gave me a DVD collection of Everybody Loves Raymond, and we didn't have a DVD player for the TV, so we just watched it on the MacBook Pro, but it's very slow. It's very old. And I know you could open it up and give it an SSD and all that. That's what my buddy Ross from the Red Komodo video, that's what he did with his MacBook, and he still uses his, but she doesn't care or use her MacBook enough for that type of retrofit to be worth it. But she does still have it, and it does still work, but it probably gets used 3 times a year or less. So it basically just sits under the bed for the most part. Series 3 getting watchOS 8 is like a Toyota Corolla entertainment system getting Tesla FSD software. As in like barely, not barely. It's not possible. That's the crazy thing, yeah. I'm amazed watchOS 8 is still working on the Series 3. Although I imagine it has to be extremely dumbed down, right? Like, are you getting like half the features that watchOS 8 talked about, and you're just getting barely any little OS changes here and there? If Apple were to send you products for reviewing, but only a particular category, Mac, iPhone, wearable, which category would you choose? Ooh, that's a great question. Wow. Okay. I can only choose one category. Mac, iPhone, wearable. Sending products for reviewing, I'm going to get most of these products for reviewing anyway myself, but if Apple's contacting me directly, then I think I would go iPhone simply because that's probably the biggest Apple product each year, like in terms of views and watch time. So if we're just talking about Apple can send me a product for review, like early, like people on Tim Cook's nice list, that one would probably generate the biggest amount of clicks and the biggest amount of watch time if you got the iPhone early each year. Compared to getting the Mac early, that would probably generate some attention and some clicks and watch time if you got, a new Mac before everybody else did. But I think that the Macs are more tools and productivity-based hardware that not as many people get compared to the smartphone, compared to the iPhone. Everybody, not everybody, but a ton more people get those. They cater to professionals, they cater to YouTubers, they cater to everyday consumers. That's like their best-selling product. So for the sake of being a content creator, and this question is kind of formulated around being a content creator, getting the iPhone early would probably give you a competitive advantage over a lot of the tech community. So I think I would choose iPhone. That's a really good question, because obviously if I get to keep the products they send me, the Mac would save me a lot more money. If they sent me the Apple Silicon Mac Pro and I didn't have to pay for that, that would be a huge financial saver. But I'm guessing I have a theory that the review units have to go back after a certain amount of time, so I don't think that would be it. You can get all the expensive Macs and the Pro Display XDR for free, at least for a few weeks. well, I could do the return policy now. I could get a hold of a Pro Display, use it for 2 weeks, and then return it. Whereas the iPhone, that's something that you get pretty that's pretty much the biggest. That's the peak of Apple interest on YouTube and online every year. When Apple unveils a new iPhone, that sends headlines everywhere. New Macs, yeah, kind of. It's more of a tech enthusiast thing, though. I feel bad for anyone that buys a Series 3 for $200. I know, me too. I can't believe they're still selling it, especially with how dated the CPU and stuff everything is in there. Like, I am genuinely shocked. I really didn't think the Series 3 would last this long, but Apple seems to really want that $200 starting price for the Apple Watch. I just wish that the SE could be that cheap, but maybe that's not doable yet. Maybe they're waiting on the supply chains to get cheap enough. Let's see. Your reaction on the new international watch faces and bands, 22 countries, like, geez. Yeah, that's cool. They're just that watch bands don't, I don't know. They don't look, I don't know. They don't look good to me. It's just like random colors. No one's going to look at that watch band and be like, haha, the Canada watch band. I've gotten out of the watch band game because in the early days of the Apple Watch, I used to just use it as an excuse to go to the Apple store. I was just like, I want to just go to the Apple store. Let's get a watch band. I'll just buy a watch band. $50 there, $50 there, occasionally $100 there. You know, getting all these watch bands and collecting them. And then I realized the more watch bands you collect, the less useful they become because you can really only wear one watch band at a time. So the bigger that collection grows, the more useless that collection grows. And then you just have this big box of watch bands sitting around, and they don't get much use. So I've started giving them away for like birthdays or graduation gifts. I'll just like give someone a watch band, or just if they have the Apple Watch of my size. And that's also in the back of my mind. It's like one of these days, I don't know when it's going to be. It might be a long time. It might be 5 years. It might be 20 years. But one day, Apple's going to change the watch band connector on the Apple Watch. And all the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars we spent on these watch bands, it's all going to become pointless. Because these things, as cool as they are and as futuristic as they are and how much usefulness there is in an Apple Watch, they're not built to last forever. Okay, smartwatches, you know, as much as I love them, and I don't really care about luxury watches or fashion watches or Rolexes. I never cared about watches before the Apple Watch, really. It's a fair assessment to me to say that a smartwatch is really not made to last, 5 or 10 years. It's made to last, okay, maybe 5. I'll give it 5, but definitely not 10 because the battery health gets shot. It's not easy to replace the battery, and Apple stops updating them. Well, not the Series 3, but that's from 2017. It's not even 5 years yet. Apple will stop updating them and giving them new features. And I love my Apple Watch, and I'm not saying Apple should make them last 20, 30 years if it was possible. I think they would, but I just physically don't think it is. With the amount of energy this watch uses and the amount of functionality this watch has, it's probably just not feasible to make an Apple Watch that could last that long and get updates for that long. But because Apple Watches are the type of watch that you're basically gonna have to replace after around 5 or 6 years. We got to get M1 in the Apple Watch. Then it'll last a long, long time. But because of that, I don't think it's a good idea to drop hundreds and eventually thousands of dollars on watch bands onto a certain standard that could easily be changed one year. Could be this year for all we know. Maybe the Series 7 has the squared off design, and that squared off design isn't compatible with the old watch bands. And because of all that building up in my head, I'm just like, I don't want to spend more money on watch bands because very quickly I started doing it like every other month. I would buy a new watch band, and I just looked at my collection and I was like, this is all going to become pointless one day. This is all just going to be a bunch of useless plastic that I can't use because the new Apple Watches won't work on these bands. I'm not saying it'll happen. It could happen this year, but it probably won't. It could be a very slow, gradual process. Or they do that thing where they're like, the solo loop band doesn't work with the Series 3. And it does, but it's just not a very firm attachment, or the braided loop doesn't really attach very solid. It kind of does, but it's not flush, and it's not as aligned as well. Yeah, I'm also very interested in what the pipeline for Apple Watches are. I would have no interest. People have tried. People have come to me and say, like, this watch will last 30, 50 years. It's built to last, and it's rugged, it's durable, and you can replace the battery really easily. And I don't care, because all it does is tell the time. I can check my phone for the time. That's not why I got a watch. The Apple Watch, the reason it's the most popular watch in the world is because it does so much more than that. It's so much more connected to your phone, and it's able to deliver messages and unlock my Mac, and I can use it for Apple Pay, and all of those things are why I want a watch, particularly a smartwatch. I don't want a watch if all it does is tell the time and the date, or even if it's a Garmin and it does something slightly more than that. Well, it delivers a text message. Like, even that, I don't care. So I'm perfectly aware and totally content that, yes, after 5 years or whatever, I'm probably going to have to buy a new Apple Watch. Okay, that's 2 Apple Watches a decade for all the usefulness and all the practicality an Apple Watch gives me. I'm okay if I have to buy a new one every 4 to 5 years. It could be less, it could be every other year, but they're cheap enough to me that it's justified. Yeah, the Apple Watch needs Mac OS, exactly. You can get to any Apple event or get all products early, but of course you have to return it. I would definitely get all products early because I'm not an event person. I don't really like going to concerts. I don't really like going out and having to book hotels and going to venues and find parking. And it just, after this whole trip and driving all over the place, it's just like, I'm totally fine if Apple decides to keep events online forever. Marquez said the same thing, which kind of surprised me because he goes to, he's been going to Apple events for a long time. And he genuinely said on our podcast, he was like, I don't need to go back. He's like, that's so much work, that's so much stress, and having to book plane tickets and fly all that distance and having to bring my Mac with me and edit everything. He's totally fine if all the events here on out are just online and we just all watch it from home. And I'm in the same boat. I don't need to go to an event in person myself. But if I could get products early, that helps my job. That helps me review stuff, and that helps me have a, early access compared to the average consumer. That would help my channel for sure if I had those kinds of exclusive scoops. So yeah, I would definitely take that. They're still selling the iPod Touch at this point. Nothing surprises me. Yeah, that's bizarre too, but things still surprise me. I was not expecting Apple to be the type to be like, Series 3, you're getting another year. That's pretty crazy. Number one feature of the Apple Watch is Apple Pay. It's super useful for daily commuting. Yeah, I agree. I've used it constantly at grocery stores and restaurants and all kinds of stuff over our trip. I think even gas stations support it now. But yeah, it's a life send to not have to get my phone out of my pocket or my wallet when I want to pay for something. I just click and tap, and it still gets a reaction out of cashiers. That's another amazing thing to me. This has been out for how long? Like, the first Apple Watch that came out had Apple Pay, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe like every Apple Watch had the Apple Pay feature, or it came out in an update in watchOS 2 or whatever. It didn't take long. And we've had Apple Watches now since like 2015. So it's been like 6 years now of Apple Pay being on phones and being just tap your phone or whatever. And there are still places I go where they're like, okay, your total is $12 or whatever. And I'm like, all right. And I click and tap, and they're like, whoa, that's cool. You can pay with your watch? And I'm not trying to be, okay, they probably don't see that very often, but either way, it shocks me that there haven't been enough people to adopt that the cashiers have become used to it. But it's just funny to me that I still run into cashiers that have never seen that before. But yeah, I think those features and also the unlocking my Mac thing is really helpful, and unlocking my iPhone when I have a face mask on, which I did have it a lot on the whole flight down here. That was being able to unlock my phone through my watch. Those kinds of features are like key, like must-haves. That's one of the reasons the Apple Watch is so useful and so important. Also, another big one is being able to adjust volume. If you have AirPods on and your phone's in your pocket and you want to change the music, you just scroll down with the digital crown. That is so simple, and I can pause it from there really easily too. Those are the type of features that make the Apple Watch like just such a blessing, such a key to the ecosystem, that make the ecosystem significantly worse if you don't have it. Which is why I couldn't care less about those collectors' watches, the ones that last forever, or the ones that are timeless or have really high price or high fashion or really customizable, whatever it is. Even if it's a Garmin, even if it's slightly smart, the fact that it doesn't do that instantly makes it less desirable and less worth it to me. I would spend more money on this than any other watch. I don't care if it's a $100,000 Rolex. If I'm not allowed to sell it and someone was like, would you rather have this watch or would you rather have an Apple Watch? I'd be like, I'll take the Apple Watch, please. Obviously, if I was allowed to sell it, I'd be like, yeah, I'll take the Rolex, sell it for $100,000, buy myself a Tesla, and then buy an Apple Watch. Does Spotify support the Apple Watch? Yes, they do. And I believe they just rolled out an option to download music directly to the watch from the Spotify app. I haven't tried it yet, but I think I read somewhere. But yeah, they have their own UI. Like the volume indicator changes on Spotify, and they have their own Now Playing tab when you're using Spotify. They've done a good job with the Apple Watch support. Okay, they clarified. Apple Pay was introduced with the iPhone 6, and Apple Watch launched 3 to 4 months after iPhone 6. Okay. I don't know if it's just because of COVID, but I pretty much stopped wearing my Series 5 entirely and wear a traditional hand-wound mechanical watch. Maybe I'm just a nerd. You're not a nerd. A lot of people are like that. I'm not trying to shame anyone who does. I'm just letting people know about my preferences and what I'm comfortable with. I know a lot of people that love wearing typical watches or collect them because that's just something they enjoy, or there's a lot of nostalgia involved. You know, I've met a lot of people that are just like, my grandfather gave me this watch, or my grandfather had this brand of watch, or so they have family involved with it, or there's history to it, and they just want to keep that, and they want to wear that because they think it looks nice. I got no problem with whatever fashion you want to do. You want to wear a dress, wear a dress. If you want to wear a bright pink t-shirt, I'm not going to do it, but you can. That's fine. Like, that's not my style, but if that's your style, go for it. Same thing with watches. If the Apple Watch doesn't fit your vibe, if it doesn't fit your style, and an old classic watch does, or an old mechanical hand-wound watch does, good for you. Go ahead and do that. I'm not the type of person to be around someone with a normal watch and be like, does that watch have Apple Pay? Oh, disgusting. No, I've never brought that up. Normally, I won't say anything about someone's watch in general, unless maybe it's a Apple Watch. Then I might ask them, like, why did you choose that size? Or my good friend Mike's wife just got a Series 5 recently in stainless steel, and I hadn't seen a stainless steel Series 5 in person. So I was like, whoa, you got a new watch. Can I see it? And I just looked at it for a second. It was the smaller 40 millimeter size. And I was like, yeah, this display's actually not that tiny for the 40 millimeter. I still prefer the 44, but the smaller size is a lot more usable on the 40 millimeter compared to the 38 millimeter. That thing is so dang small. I don't know how people can live with that. That's what my sister got not that long ago. I think it was on sale or something. But yeah, I looked at it, and that 38 millimeter screen is tiny. I don't know how anyone can get used to that. But yeah, especially putting it next to my 44 millimeter. It looks such a baby watch. Let's see. The Series 7 is going to be a marginal change. I can't imagine what they could add. I think most likely it's either a redesign or a battery boost, because I agree there's not much else they can do with it. For a while, I was just thinking another new health sensor. Maybe this is the year we get glucose monitoring. But I also think that the redesign would be a marginal update. You know, it's mainly just going to be the chassis being more squared off. If that's all it is, I don't think that's a great reason to upgrade, because I know a lot of people who aren't going to like the squared off look. I will, but I'm still torn on whether or not I should upgrade, because I just got this watch last year, and I normally don't want to keep an Apple Watch for 1 year and then upgrade again, because that's a lot of money to spend on a watch. But I do want my watch to match the rest of my ecosystem with the squared off iPad, squared off iPhone. It's weird that this is still rounded off. And of the renders I've seen of what a squared Apple Watch would look like, I think that looks awesome, and I could totally get behind it. But I'll probably try to sell this at a good price, kind of offset some of that cost if I do. And if I can't sell this, then I might just not upgrade for a while. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah, that's not Apple's philosophy. It's if it ain't broke, provide 8 new color options. If it ain't broke, talk about watch bands. If it ain't broke, offer Apple Card financing to make it broke. Get it? There's like a double meaning there. Do you really think an iPod refresh is in the works? Not really. Also, according to leaks, the next-gen iPhone SE will also be the same design. Reactions on that. It makes sense if the purpose of the SE is to be cheaper. I think that if they did make the third-generation SE look like an iPhone XR and it had a full-screen display and Face ID, it would probably sell too well. Because not enough people would care about the difference between OLED and LCD and 2 cameras versus 1 camera. They would probably, if there was a rebranded iPhone XR with a new CPU, Apple knows that the big iPhones sell the best. The 6-inch screen size is the most popular. And if they made a $400 iPhone with a 6-inch screen, it would probably start cannibalizing too much. So finding out that the 3rd-gen SE was basically just the same as the 2nd-gen SE is probably good because some people probably still want a home button. Some people still want Touch ID, and having an option for them is good. And then offering the best, latest silicon in that iPhone for a reasonable price, there's a healthy, fairly substantial demographic for that. So it makes sense to me. On one hand, I'm also like, yeah, it would be really nice if the whole ecosystem could match and we just finally abandon the home button and we have notches across the entire lineup and that's it. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, having a little diversity on the budget end for someone who wants a really cheap iPhone and they want the home button and all that, it's fine. And I think if there is an iPod refresh, it's probably just a CPU boost. I doubt it's a redesign. I haven't seen anyone super reputable or reliable say that the iPod is getting a drastic redesign or something. I don't think that'll happen. I think the iPod Touch sells an extremely low volume, and I think that the people who claim restaurants or businesses use iPod Touches for inventory are just making stuff up. I've literally never seen that, and I know lots of people in the chat who also said the same thing, that they never seen that happen. It just sounds like a myth people use to justify the iPod Touch's existence. People are like, no, restaurant waiters use the iPod Touch to take orders. I'm like, no, they don't. These iPads, what are you talking about? People buy they buy the $300 iPad in bulk. You buy like 10 of those because it's got a full-size keyboard. Your employees walking around with a tiny iPod display just so they can take notes. You would just use your own phone at that point, right? They just make a shared note with whatever people's iPhone is. People already got a smartphone and put it in Google Sheets if they have Android. Like, I don't know. I've just never seen that, but I've seen 1 or 2 people try to make that argument of, yeah, see, Rage says, my store used to use iPods, now we use iPhone XRs. Exactly. Even the iPhones have gotten so cheap that people would much rather just buy those instead of keep buying the old iPod Touches. The only people I've seen using iPad minis are Apple Store employees. I've seen Apple Store employees use iPhones and iPads. It depends on which store you're at. But I have not seen... The iPod Touch is the headphone demo device for the Apple Store. I think Apple is just too afraid of the headline saying Apple killed the iPod, and the iPod is like a nostalgia thing for them that's been around for so long, and it was a big part of their history, so they're very afraid of the idea of the iPod being completely gone. So they just keep it around to avoid that headline. It's probably a very tiny, very small supply chain. The factory line is very, very minimal, and they just give it a new CPU every couple of years so that it can keep getting the latest iOS. But that's about it. I don't think they're going to turn it into a Switch competitor. Some people were talking about that. It's so ridiculous. Or turn it into a gaming device of some kind, or give it... I don't know. What people couldn't understand or wrap their head around is the reason people think the iPod Touch has potential is because it's cheap. But the reason it's cheap is because it's old and basic. It doesn't even have Touch ID. And it has a underclocked A10 chip. It has a sub 720p display. And it has, I think, the worst camera in an iOS device in the past, 5 years. The cameras are super basic. It doesn't have a Taptic engine. It's a very small display. It's a tiny battery. It's like the 1100 milliamp hours or something really, really small. And the battery life on it sucks. It doesn't have stereo speakers. It doesn't have water resistant. They weren't even shipping a charge brick with the iPod in 2019. Now that's become normal with the iPhone. But way back then, the iPod didn't even come with a 5-watt brick. So that's how they're able to get it to $200. What I kept seeing in chat or on Twitter is like, well, it would be great if the iPod, have a bigger display, and it would be a great gaming device for kids. And, if you tried to give it all this extra hardware and make it a gaming device and give it a bigger display and all that, it would no longer be cheap. You're basically describing an iPhone, and then it would be the cost of an iPhone. So basically what you're describing is an iPhone. You're saying if they turn the iPod into an iPhone, maybe it would be good at gaming. It's like, yeah, they already have that, though. It's called the iPhone. But even the kids, I don't buy the kids argument, because you can buy an unlocked iPhone for super duper cheap now. Third party, you can buy an iPhone way better than an iPod unlocked. Trust me, it's the easiest thing in the world to just not set up cellular on an iPhone. Or what parents do nowadays is they give their kids their old phone. They buy the new iPhone and they give their kid their old phone, and they just turn off the cellular option because they took the SIM out, so it just turns into an iPod. So I don't think it makes sense. It's like, I don't even see kids using iPods these days. Kids have freaking Apple Watches these days. Like, there's like a freaking 5-year-old with an iPhone 10 I saw not long ago. I was just like, they don't give iPods to kids anymore. They just give them old iPhones. If Apple ever made a professional DSLR, how would they be able to advertise it in a way that it doesn't underestimate the iPhone's camera capabilities? Probably by heavily leaning into why it's the best at professional, best in class. They do it kind of all the time with, like, they talk about how the iPad is really powerful and has all this great software, right? And the iPad can do Swift playgrounds, and the iPad has LumaFusion. So they advertise all this stuff, but we all know at the end of the day, the Mac is way better at this. The Mac has way higher end software. It has access to way better software and can be way faster and have way more RAM and all that, but they still coexist. So I don't think if Apple had a DSLR, it would suddenly look awkward next to their iPhone computational stuff. It would just, DSLRs do so much different from smartphone cameras. Smartphone cameras are basically crap lenses with extremely advanced artificial intelligence on the computational side. Between deep fusion, artificial intelligence, HDR, masking out things, all of that is really done on the chip. Most of what makes a smartphone camera great is done on the CPU. The lenses and the sensors themselves honestly don't result in a huge difference. Like, people have been saying Pixels have the best cameras for years, and they've basically had the same lens for the past 4 generations of Pixel. They haven't changed the sensor itself. They just improved the computational side of things. And it's somewhat similar with iPhones. They do improve the sensors and lenses to a certain extent, but if you were to grab just the raw data and you just had a basic chip, that lens wouldn't take a very good picture. It's all on the computational side. DSLR is almost complete opposite. The chip and the processor they give to DSLR cameras is very basic, very low end, but you have a very large, very detailed sensor that's able to capture real detail. It's not faking detail. That's what an iPhone does, is it fills in gaps and it guesses and it takes a bunch of pictures at once and uses AI to merge all those pictures to create more detail and to create better lighting out of that picture. DSLR doesn't really do that. It just actually takes the picture, and it's a much larger sensor, so it collects more light. It's a bigger lens that actually creates a blurred background or a blurred foreground and an in-focus subject. It's not pretending like your iPhone does, where it's like, I think that's the background, so I'll blur there, and then this is the subject, so I'll keep that in focus, and I'll add brightness here because my AI is telling me that would look better if I had bokeh here. A DSLR doesn't fake anything, it just does it. So if Apple were to make their own DSLR, they wouldn't be bragging about computational stuff. They would be bragging about capabilities of zoom and pixel density and the size of the sensor and how much light it lets in. the processor in a DSLR is basically just for the settings menu. Yeah, there's almost no computational stuff done in most DSLRs. If you start getting into Red, that's when they have really, really high-end CPUs in order to write high data, high raw video files at an extremely quick amount, at a quick pace. You can write just gigabytes and gigabytes of files really quickly. But that's not really a DSLR. That's like a heavy-duty grade video camera. But I would love it if Apple got into DSLRs because iPhones are really good, and I think they're great for the average consumer. They're a great point and shoot. I don't take DSLRs on my trips. I took all kinds of pictures on my vacation, and they did great. I'm fine with the iPhone, but when it comes to stuff like this or editing filming my actual videos, it's still nowhere close. The iPhone has gotten a lot better, but it's still nowhere near as good as actual sensors and lenses. It's not even in the same ballpark. It's a night and day difference. Trust me, I've tried. When the iPhone first got 4K at 60, people were like, you should just film all your videos on the iPhone. And I did some test footage and tried to edit it, and it was noticeably worse. It didn't look good. It's good for a phone, but it's not anywhere near what a DSLR or a professional grade camera can actually achieve. What lens mounting system would Apple use? Do you think they would make their own proprietary mounting hardware that could create an entirely new industry? Yeah, they probably would. I'd be very surprised if Apple was like, we're going to adopt the Canon EF standard. I mean, if we're talking today's Apple, the kind that's trying to not be accused of anti-competition and all the antitrust issues, maybe they would. Maybe they would pick an RF attachment or a Nikon attachment and make an open, make a standard, adopt a standard that other people are comfortable with. But in the grand scheme of Apple, they usually like to make their own proprietary connectors and attachments. So I would not be shocked at all if Apple was like, yeah, this is our own lens attachment, and it's very clean and very simple and easy to use, and it's better than everybody else's lens attachment, but that means you have to buy our lenses, or third parties can make lenses for the Apple camera, but they have to pay us a royalty for the connector. That sounds like something Apple would do, but I'd be fine with it because I just want a DSLR with AirDrop, basically. If I could not have to use CFast cards or SD cards, and I could just share footage from a heavy-duty DSLR or a Apple video camera, and I could just AirDrop it directly to my Mac, that would be so much better than having to deal with all these cards. I have to, but it's annoying. It's still annoying having to deal with all the cards and then put them in the camera, take it out the camera, plug it in the adapter, go through the import process. I could just AirDrop. Oh, that would be beautiful. They would make the camera body one size fits all, so they would go all out with a full frame or something similar like a Micro Four Thirds. I think Apple would be the type to go full frame because they would want to just make sure that they had the best DSLR in the industry. But yeah, they probably aren't going to do that. They just think, oh no, the iPhone camera, that's the future of cameras. We just make the iPhone camera better. But I'm like, oh, Apple, come on. There's got to be some professionals at Apple. You're not filming your events on iPhones, Apple. And I don't think you're going to anytime soon because they're not going to hit your bokeh and lens or dynamic range requirements. If something's shot on an iPhone, Apple lets you know. They're like, hey, this ad was shot on iPhone. But then when they're shooting their events and stuff, yeah, they're using heavy-duty professional cameras. And then they got to put up with all the CFast cards and everything. The DSLR will charge via Lightning. Ugh. Please, no. Let's see. Couldn't Canon or Sony work with Apple to bring AirDrop to their cameras? Oh, yeah. I'm sure they'd be open to it. Probably Canon and Sony would be totally open to it, but Apple isn't, I'm guessing. There might be some privacy or security thing protocol that they build into Apple Silicon, and because there's no Apple Silicon in those cameras, they can't bring AirDrop to it. I don't know. There's probably some dumb excuse, but I would still love it. Just Blackmagic. Blackmagic designs all their stuff to work directly with Apple. They always advertise all their hardware and software on Apple hardware. And if they just worked with Apple on an AirDrop standard, that would be amazing. Is there any other things you want a camera to do with Apple products besides AirDrop? They could make the UI really simple and easy to understand. A lot of cameras have really crappy user interface and options and settings and stuff. It's really hard to understand, and Apple's really good at that. So the user interface would be good. Also, the computational side of things, if you could do 3D mapping and really laser fast and really accurate autofocus with face tracking and that kind of thing. There's all kinds of smart stuff you could build in through Apple. A biometric, people can just steal your camera and there's no protection. You could put a Apple camera in the Find My network. You could track it down. Yeah, Sony's pretty bad. Sony UI is poor. That's what I mean. Like, Apple could make a really easy to use, but also really customizable and really capable camera that's really, especially just pictures. If you just took a picture on your camera and now you want to airdrop it to your iPad and edit it, that would just be amazing. Anyway, I got to get going, but I appreciate all the Twitch Primes and everyone for tuning in. I missed you guys. I got some videos coming up for you shortly. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.